Hello, and welcome to Dead Air Live, the longest running show in the world, I think, for community TV. And if it's not, it is now. My name is Richard Mullen. I'm your host today of the show, and I'm also the coordinator of the Go Green Consortium. I got a special guest today. It's Erin Acevedo, and she's a chiropractor. And we've got some questions to ask her because I'm very interested in chiropractic and some of the things you do. So we're going to start off. Erin, let me ask you the first, most easiest question I think that you're going to go along with. How long have you been a chiropractor?
I've been a chiropractor since 1991. I graduated from Palmer College of Chiropractic, and I started my practice soon after that.
Okay, so you've seen the process. Chiropractic has changed a little bit in those 21 years, I would imagine. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just getting more and more advanced. There's more discoveries, and there's more techniques that have been developed to help people with back and neck pain, musculoskeletal problems.
Okay, so it's not like the old days when you just go in. I can remember in 1960, chiropractics were kind of seen to be a little strange, or they weren't accepted into the medical field. And then sometime like in the 70s or something, they started to really be accepted. But you never felt that because you got in on the, after people were pretty well considered as an alternative medicine. Is that true?
Yeah, it is alternative medicine. We don't use any drugs or surgery. We use only natural methods to heal the body and to restore health. We believe in innate intelligence. This is a life force that comes from within your body, and it can be released through chiropractic adjustments to help improve healing of back pain, neck pain, or other types of health problems.
Okay, so if I go to a chiropractor, when you see me coming in, like I always feel funny when I'm around chiropractors because I wonder if I'm standing straight or they're looking at me because my shoulder's tipped or my head isn't quite right. You do that to people?
I do look at people's posture. And the posture can reveal a lot about what's going on in someone's back and neck. If people's shoulders are rolled forward or if one shoulder is higher than the other, it can indicate a muscle imbalance, or it could indicate tight muscles. Like if your shoulders are rolled forward, it's usually tightness in the pectoralis muscles and a weakness in some of the back muscles. So what I do in my practice is I diagnose by looking at the posture, and then I come up with a treatment plan that, for example, with the rolled shoulders, I would give people exercises to strengthen their back, to bring their shoulders back, and I do some massage to release the spasms that are pulling their shoulders forward. So it's all about creating balance.
So balance is the whole thing that we're going
yes.
after.
And alignment, structural alignment.
But would you say, and I think I've read this someplace, so maybe you do this too. Are you looking at the person holistically, or are you looking at it just to treat the spine or the shoulder or some part of the body? Or do you see them as a whole organism, for example?
Absolutely. I see someone as more than just a musculoskeletal system. You have to take into account many aspects of a person, even like their daily life, if they've been in a history of accidents or injuries, or if they have other chemical and metabolic imbalances, that can also affect the person's health. Mental, emotional states, like having a positive mindset, is so important to health. Like you see people who are rolled over like this with their shoulders, and it's like they're just, you can see that they're just, not feeling their top. They're not feeling great, and so we address mindset as well as musculoskeletal issues.
So I think from like my experience, I know if I'm really under stress, all of a sudden, not only do I have a headache, but I have neck pain, and then it will transfer down my back. And is that something when you meet people, you try to find out where they are? Like, you get into the therapeutic part of it, or is that something you just stay away from?
Well, I don't do therapy like a psychologist or anything like that, but I do counsel people about stress management, and I do have some really good techniques that I teach people to help relax, like breathing exercises. I may teach if someone comes in and says, I'm getting headaches. It always happens after a long day at work. And I'd ask, well, what's going on at work? Oh, I have a really difficult job. I'm really stressed out. So then not only would I be working on their tight muscles and getting them into alignment, I would also be maybe giving them some stress management exercises, like breathing exercises, learning to take deep breaths, And there's a special technique that I also teach people, is the hue, which is a word you can chant, and it helps to relax you. It helps connect your heart to the heart of God. And there's nothing more healing for stress than just feeling love and connection with Divine Spirit.
So is it kind of like everybody has their own word? Or they pick a word that they want that they
well,
can just...
you could pick a word.
Mm-hmm.
You could pick a word if you wanted to. And Dr. Herbert Benson, he wrote the book, The Relaxation Response. He talks about using the word one, O-N-E, and just say, you just close your eyes and you just say, one. You know, you could pick any word. It could be om. It could be amen. You know, but there's any word that you feel comfortable with, you can use. The idea is to repeat the word over and over for 15, 20 minutes. And at the end of that period of time, you will feel a tremendous relief of stress. Of course, I like to use hue because that's the one that works best for me. But people can choose their own word.
So you use which word?
H-U.
Is that on your license plate? I haven't noticed that.
And it's on my license plate of my car.
All right. So when people like in traffic, you know, instead of saying what they really want to say, they can just say you.
Yeah.
And they can go.
It goes like this. You. This is like a long, drawn-out a sound.
So kind of like the Om thing, and you connect that every time you do that. I presume that you'd ever connect that to a positive influence, and therefore you're creating some very strong responses from the chemicals in your brain.
Yes. It can actually change your biochemistry. They've done studies on this. It lowers blood pressure. It slows your breathing rate. It creates a state of peace and calm that helps people heal and relieve those stress and tensions that you experience at work.
Yeah. So, like, when you were driving here today, were you using a lot of U's?
I think I threw a couple of hues in there. Yeah, when I'm driving and I'm in traffic and I'm running late, this is the perfect time to do your stress management techniques. Just a couple of deep breaths, then do a hue. Or you could do your one or your own, whatever word feels right to you. And pretty soon you're not worrying about the traffic anymore. You're feeling comfortable. You're feeling relaxed. And that's the best state to heal in.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But let's talk about some of the things I think that we have talked about before were things like toxins getting into your body and becoming part of the process that actually makes you sick.
Okay.
And so when you meet somebody and you can see somebody that probably has a series, maybe they eat wrong or they stand wrong or they're up late at night or they drink a lot of coffee. And is that something where you talk about? Would you ever get into what their diet is as you're talking to them and counseling them, or is that part of your experience?
Absolutely. The first thing I do when I meet a new patient, I do a thorough musculoskeletal examination. I'll check their range of motion. I'll check their spinal alignment. I test over 64 muscles in the body. So I go through all the muscles. I do the posture analysis, a very thorough musculoskeletal exam. That's my first visit, and I will give recommendations about what I'm finding. As we work together, then I'm going to, if those aches and pains that they came in for do not go away right away, that's when I start digging a little deeper. Usually on the second visit or the third visit, I'll give them a symptom survey. So it gives me a little bit more idea about their symptoms and what category to put them in. Are they more digestive symptoms? Are they symptoms related to the liver function or hormonal imbalances? I'll be checking all these things as we go along in the process. And toxins. I give out a toxin survey on like the fourth or the fifth visit to see how overloaded their system is with toxins. So it's something as longer I see somebody, the more I will be diving deeper into what is causing their concerns, so we can address them and they can get better.
Well, I remember the old chiropractor was people say, I want to get my back cracked, and they'd show up and they'd get their back cracked, and then that was it. They'd go home and leave, and then come back, very interestingly, 3 weeks later with the same problem. Have you found that there's some people, the way that they actually treat people? Okay,
so if somebody comes back 3 weeks later with the exact same problem, there could be a couple of things going on. Either they need to be seen more frequently to get this adjustment to hold, or perhaps there's another underlying problem that hasn't yet been addressed. So that's when I'd start digging deeper, do some more questioning to find out what the situation is with that particular person.
So now, in the food part of it, I mean, because we have, a strange food process that we eat now, and I noticed that the food quality goes down as the price goes up. And when you're talking to people, would you get into diet, or would you just kind of not be try to stay away from that? Is there anything you stay away from? I guess that's the thing that I'm wondering about.
I would definitely go into the diet aspect. I give people a diet history to fill out, and it takes about a week to write down everything they're eating. Everything that goes into your mouth, I want to know about, because one of those things could actually be causing a problem for your digestion, for your body. So I need to know about that, and that's part of the thoroughness of my examination, is that I include everything that you eat.
Okay, so, and what about, would you design an exercise program for them that goes along with, like, spinal? I mean, every time I have a pain or an ache, I always get it up to the fact I'm lazy, that I'm not doing the right thing, that something's wrong with, that I'm not doing correctly. Well, like I'll find my knees or something will get painful, and it just means that I haven't been doing back exercises. Okay. I mean, does that, that's my own concern. That's what I've come up with, my own diagnosis. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but.
Knee pain could cause back pain. Absolutely. Foot pain can cause back pain. If your foot isn't properly supported in the shoe, or if you're wearing shoes that don't fit well, that can cause back pain, especially if you're on your feet all day. And knee pain could be coming from injuries. You could have inflammation in your joints. It's complicated with knees. Any kind of joint pain could be actually coming from a bad diet. If you have certain toxins floating around in your blood, it could cause you to feel very sore and very achy. That's why I would go back to the diet. If someone has like a chronic joint pain situation, maybe they're bordering on developing arthritis, or they could have an autoimmune problem where you get swollen joints. There's a lot of things that could cause joint pain. I mean, the first thing I would rule out is, did you fall? Do you have an injury in your knee? Is there any kind of trauma to the knee? That's like the first most obvious thing I would look at. But like if I do an adjustment, I give some treatment to that area, maybe an ice pack. I do laser therapy to help heal injured ligaments. We could do a couple of treatments, and if you're still not well, then I would go explore further, and possibly there's inflammation, systemic inflammation that's running through your body that seems to be lodging in your joints, causing you to be sore and achy.
So what I know about inflammation is it's related to both the stress and food. So that if you have, let's say if I have stress, then I'm going to create, it can be, like I'm trying to think, too much coffee, too much sugar, too much sweets, too much, that's what I always find relates to it when I'm doing things like that. All of a sudden I feel pain in my body. And do you find that with your patients or your clients? Or?
Absolutely. Some people are very, very sensitive to sugar and processed food, and it can cause inflammation.
And so once inflammation, then that's where you start to get pain, or your back or your knees or your feet.
Yeah, the inflammation makes you feel more achy and sore, and it causes people to be uncomfortable. If you find you respond well to ibuprofen, like a lot of people when they get sore and achy and they have a lot of pain, they'll take a couple of ibuprofens, or Motrin, or Aleve. These are the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medicines that the medical doctors will give you, or you can get them over the counter. If you find those are actually working and you feel better, then I would guess that you have a problem with inflammation. It's the big trick is finding out what's causing the inflammation. But if you're getting relief by taking Motrin, you probably are suffering from an inflammatory process that's going on.
That's interesting. So you could have either one or the other. If Motrin works, then you'd look at one, maybe inflammation. If it was something else, you'd go somewhere else. That makes sense. Is there anything that really stands out that's continuous that you see the most when people come in? It's a recurring type of symptom that comes over and over and over. or anything like that that you see in your office?
Back and neck pain is something I see a lot of. People have been in car accidents, low back pain, neck pain caused by holding the phone the wrong way. I had a patient recently, and she had a lot of neck pain, and she was, it was all on the left side, and it was very, very tight. Sometimes she would just feel like it just completely locked up on her. She could hardly move her head, and she was very uncomfortable, and it was causing headaches. So after talking to this woman a few times, I discovered that when she's at work, she holds the phone between her shoulder and her ear, and she works very long hours in that position. I'll just demonstrate a little bit of what it looks like. She would hold the phone like that. So we had to get her a headset so that she wouldn't do that, because she had to answer the phone, she had to write. So we got her a headset, so she stopped doing that. But it did take a while to release the muscle spasms that had developed in her neck, especially the left side. And she had like some pinched nerves. It was causing numbness into her arms. She had some spasms in her chest. She had her spasms in her back. But it sounds like a lot, and it was a lot of work, but we actually got her feeling fabulous, free of pain, no more numbness down her arm, and very happy. She loves her headset. She wears it every day.
Wow, that's really amazing. Hey, here's a question, and I see it all the time when I'm on the subway or I'm traveling, especially if I'm at a university doing something. I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of the younger people now are constantly like this, head down and clicking away. And I noticed that it's almost as they're putting weight on their neck and their head. And this back of the neck area is being stretched. Are you starting to see anything come of that? I mean, have you treated anybody that's because they have been looking down too long and just, clicking away on their phone?
Yes, that is a really common problem. Looking down at your phone for prolonged periods of time is just unnatural for your neck, and it will cause, most people will end up with some kind of neck pain. The other problem is the laptop, because it's not at the right height. Ideally, you want your computer at eye level, or your phone. So ideally, you'd want it so it's right at eye level, so you don't have to bend your head. If you were bending your head for that long, say like 4 hours, you're probably going to end up with neck pain. And same with the laptop. What I recommend to people is to put your laptop on like a desk and then elevate it with a series of books so that you get it at least close to eye level. That way, you're not going to strain your neck, and you can work for hours in that position and not have any neck pain. There is an increase in neck issues associated with using a phone, texting on a phone. So I try to counsel my patients to text safely and to use the laptop safely so it won't injure their neck.
Well, I find that when I change vehicles, when I get a new car and I move from one to the other, it takes me probably 3 months to adapt to that vehicle, because if everything is a little bit different, slightly different, I have to adapt my body to it, how to sit, where to put my feet, where to put my hands. And do you find people coming in with problems because of the way they drive, where we spend so much time in a vehicle and we're in a car for so long under stress?
Absolutely. Yeah, the car is a really important place to be comfortable, because you're going to be in the car for hours or minutes, hours. It depends on how far your commute is or what your job is. I mean, people like truck drivers, they're in the car hours and hours going on long hauls. So they need to be set up before they even leave the parking lot with a comfortable situation. You want, a pillow behind your lumbar spine to support it. You would ideally want the seat the right height. You want your legs like at a comfortable angle, so you're not reaching. You want the seat close to the steering wheel, so you're not lunging forward. Just common sense type of adjustments can relieve a lot of neck and back pain that is caused by driving long distances, prolonged periods of time.
So I find myself in my vehicle, for example, if I'm driving a long time, especially if I'm in the car for more than a half an hour or something, I start to slouch over, trying to rest on the armrest. And It always does something to me. I mean, I always feel lousy, you know, like in probably an hour, but when I get out, and it takes me a while to stretch and get back into shape after I've been driving a while. Those little thing you put in the back of your car, it's kind of like a lumbar support. I guess it's ergonomics. Would you recommend something like that for a car seat, or do you think the car seat should come as they are without adding anything to it?
I think they should have lumbar support in it. Some of the high-end cars do have a lumbar support in there. I've seen them where you can adjust it, you can pump it up or make it smaller. So, and if your car doesn't have that, you can just add it. Sometimes I tell people just roll up a towel and put it in the lumbar area. And you could also get one for the cervicals, a little small pillow. I had a patient of mine, an elderly patient, who was in a motor vehicle accident, and the airbags exploded. It was a collision. She was like in her 80s. She was a collision, but she always drove with this little pillow right behind her neck. And I was like really amazed at how she was not injured. Her neck was not injured because she had this pillow in the perfect spot to protect her neck, and the airbags exploded. And normally, you know, there would be like a little bit of a whiplash type situation where your head goes back and you strain the front of your neck and the back of your neck. She was completely, her neck, I checked it, it was completely uninjured. And she didn't have any neck pain. She had some injuries from the airbag on her chest, but her neck fared very well considering the support that she had in her car. She always drove with this little neck pillow. And after I saw that, I'm like, I got to start selling these in my office. These are amazing.
You sell them in your office?
I don't actually now, but I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah,
it's a good idea
right?
Because it protected her, an 80-year-old woman in a serious front-end collision with no neck pain. And I rarely see that. Usually people who are in motor vehicle accidents end up with a lot of neck pain. And it takes weeks to get over it, I do treat neck and back injuries related to automobile accidents, workers' comp, or any kind of injury. It's one of my specialties.
Okay. Now, here's a question. We are told to walk a lot. And, you know, people say you should do 10,000 steps per day. That's the ideal thing. But if somebody starts out with bad posture and they're doing 10,000 steps every day, it's really got to do something to the whole body. And how do you get somebody, do you ever do an assessment for somebody how they walk and what they should be doing and the types of shoes they wear?
I do a gait analysis on the first visit. I want to see how that person is walking. It really reveals a lot about which muscles are weak, which muscles are strong. And if somebody does have a walk or a run that is unbalanced, I usually recommend that they not run until we get that corrected, because you could make pressures on the spine. You could cause more subluxations, which is areas where the nerves are interfered with. They're not functioning at 100%. So if somebody has like a distorted gait, it's important to get that straightened out first before they begin like jogging or walking.
And is that, to get that gait back, to get it correct, I mean, it almost seems like so habitual as we get older. You know, we walk a certain way, and it's really hard to change anything like that. And when you work with someone, is it something you can really get somebody to change, or is it just the fact you have to stay with them all the time and walk with them?
Yeah, changing a gait that's distorted, it really involves strengthening the weak muscles that are causing the problem. People can go years and years without getting proper chiropractic care, and these problems can develop, but it's never too late. You can always get it fixed if you come in, get an evaluation, find out where the problem areas are, and correct them. And then begin like a rehabilitation program where we retrain you to walk correctly. It's never too late. And I love working with people and seeing results, like seeing somebody have a really hunched over posture and then seeing them 6 weeks later standing straight and tall and walking straight. It's so satisfying to see results. That's one of the things I love about my job, is seeing people get well every day.
How about the shoes we wear? I know I had a serious problem. I had burning in my hip. I had 4 or 5 things in my body. And I was wearing, I thought, the best running shoes or walking shoes. And I switched over to another type of shoe, and everything went. all of those pains, they no longer existed. And it was simply by switching shoes. And I look at people walking around now, and there's some really strange shoes, like what do they call them, floppy shoes, they're whatever they are, but they're flip-flops. And some of them are the big heels. And when I look at people like with high heels, what does that do to somebody? When they get those real spikes, that's got to really have something on the spine, I would think.
So yeah, the shoes you wear make a huge difference on how you feel and your spine, your spinal health and alignment. I always look at people's shoes. I look for uneven wear on the shoes. I look for do they have a low arch, a high arch, and we can actually muscle test people in a pair of shoes to find out are these shoes the right for them. If I put somebody in a pair of shoes that's wrong for them, every muscle in their body will go weak. So it's important to get checked. Your shoes should be checked. You should be checked while you're wearing the shoes, walking, running, standing. And then, once we find the right shoe for you, the pains will go away. Mm-hmm. I've seen that before. That's a great story, Richard. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was great because all of a sudden all that pain just disappeared. It was gone.
Okay.
And, of course, I had to pay a little more for the shoes, but it was well worth it. Hey, before we go, do you have any sage advice? Maybe somebody out there watching that they can do today so they can actually feel a little better?
Well, I think the most important thing is to see a chiropractor and get your spine checked as soon as possible. I'm available to help people get well, and please call my office as soon as you get a chance.
Okay. Well, that was pretty cool. I think I learned something from you. I learned some things about what we should be doing, and I think just how I stand. I mean, I have my problems. That's why I think talking to you. And so the goal is, I think, to get in front of somebody and actually talk to someone. It's not that painful, is it, to talk to a chiropractor?
No, it's fun. I'm very curious about all my new patients, and I can't wait to meet them and help them take the next step to better health.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay then. And thank you very much, folks. And thanks for tuning in and watching. I hope we all learned something, and I take it home and tomorrow do something different and just better. Thank you. So anyhow, that's what we did.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Erin Acevedo, and I'm going to be interviewing Richard Mullen. Richard is an indoor air quality specialist who provides consultations and inspections to ensure that we breathe healthy air in our homes and workplaces. I'm going to ask Richard a couple of questions because I'm really curious about the work he does. I know a little bit about Richard because he actually did an air quality inspection in my home, and I had a very good experience with the inspection because it helped my husband get well. He was actually very sick at the time, and I didn't realize it, but the quality of our air in our house was the cause of his illness. He was suffering from vertigo. I don't know if anyone has ever experienced vertigo or you know what vertigo is, but it's a condition where there's a lot of inflammation in the inner ear, and people feel dizzy, and they may the room may feel like it's spinning, and they may fall down, or they may vomit. It's a very serious condition, and my husband was suffering from this for 3 weeks. He wasn't able to go to work, and he wasn't able to pretty much do anything. Couldn't drive a car, so we spent a lot of time in bed, and he even got dizzy in bed. So this was I was very concerned about his health. And we went to the doctor, and they didn't really have any treatment for him. So it just happened to be my lucky day when I ran into Richard Mullen at the farmer's market. And he said that he would come to the house and do an inspection for mold. I didn't really think of it as being connected to my husband's illness, but I thought, well, I know we have mold in the house, so I want to find out how bad it is. So he came to the house, he did the inspection, and the first thing he saw was the air conditioners. He says, mold can grow in window unit air conditioners. This is something I had no clue about. And he's going to talk more about this. Well, to make a long story short, we took the window air conditioner out of my husband's bedroom, and within 1 day, his dizziness went away, to my surprise, and it has not come back. And this was in August, and right now that was like 10 months ago. 8 months ago. He hasn't had one episode of vertigo, thanks to Richard. So I'm excited that Richard's here. So I want to let him explain a little bit more about why an air conditioner would cause my husband to get so sick with vertigo.
Well, I think the one thing that most people don't know, that mold is everywhere. And right here in the room we're in, there's mold. And it's just floating around the air, and it's on the ground, and it's everywhere. Mold is only a problem when it joins with moisture. And so because of the relative humidity and the moisture that's being brought into an air conditioner, that's where the mold goes. And as soon as it meets water, it starts to grow. And there's little cubby holes in places in air conditioners that are so perfect for mold to grow. It's just a perfect place. It's just a little place to hibernate and then to grow and then to spread. Now, of course, you put the fan on. And the fan is blowing out all this nice cool air, but it's loaded with mold. And the mold is just out, and it's going to continue to go until you can go in and actually kill the mold and remove it. So mold is a problem, but everybody remembers the one thing. It's everywhere, and all it needs is moisture to grow.
So how does mold affect us?
Well, it's a number of ways. One of the things about mold is that probably about 20% of the people, the population, are affected, like your husband, very seriously with mold. So what happens is that you're not affected, but you're in the same room with him. And he's got vertigo, which is one of the symptoms of severe mold problems. He starts to have all kinds of problems. And what happens in families, people say, well, it doesn't bother me. Why is it bothering you? And there's a disconnect. And the people who are having the mold problems feel kind of uncomfortable. You know, they feel, well, why am I sick? And they're not. Maybe it isn't mold. Maybe it is something else. It's too simple. So the thing is about mold and air conditioners is it's just blowing at you all the time. And a lot of times you get in a room, you close everything up. Everything is closed, the doors, and you're sitting there in front of an air conditioner just basking in the coolness on a July day. And what happens? You get a lot of mold in there. And so that's it. And especially if you're part of that 20% and you start to go with that, you're going to be really affected. And that's the problem, because not everybody is affected by mold.
Well, what is mold? Could you just explain a little bit about it?
Yeah, mold's a mystery. And a lot of people, we can talk about mold, but they don't know what mold is. Mold is in the air. It's a spore. And to give you an example of the size of mold, you can take 25,000 mold spores and fit them on the head of a pin. So just go and think now that you have the head of a pin and there's 25,000 of those. So just imagine in a room how many mold spores there are just floating around. So they're everywhere. Now, the small percentage of the population, they're affected even if mold isn't growing. If it's dead mold, it's just floating in the air, you'll start to feel that. And the inner ear is one of the things. It goes into your ear, and it causes inflammation, and then you start to lose your balance, or you get stuffed up, or you get all of the symptoms that you see as an allergy. Mm-hmm. But mold has some serious effects because it's long-term, and the longer you're exposed to it, the more your sensitivity to it increases. And so it's one of those things that just gets worse and worse. It doesn't get better until you remove mold or yourself from the area, and you stay out of it for a while. Mm-hmm. So that mold is one of it's a fungi, and it's a lot like it's part of the mushroom family. They're all involved in the same thing.
So what does an IAQ specialist do? Air quality specialist, I should say.
Well, when you were talking, I do a lot of the same thing that you do. For example, I'll go into a house and I'll look at the holistic view of the house, and I'll want to know what's going on in the air. So I don't just look at the ceiling or the floor. I look at the whole thing. So I walk around the outside of the house, and I'll see if there's moisture there. Is there any place where leaks are coming in? Do I see shingles missing? Do I see the drain pipes probably flowing into the wrong place so that they're actually kicking water back in? And so that's what I'm looking for. So I go through a house and I just do step by step. Look, and I know where all the places where mold usually is found. I think we're all familiar with it when we see it in the bathroom. It's in the bathroom, and it's a nice place because there's moisture there. There's a place for mold to grow, and it just finds a little cubby hole, and it gets in there, and it just starts to grow. And so I want to go in, and I want to find all of those places and I want to work with my client to say, here are the things we have to do. You don't have mold now. Actually, you get pretty good air. But I'm looking at this over here, and if this continues, there's going to be a problem. So I'd like you to kind of correct this, and I'll make some recommendations of how they can change things in their home. And it's a process. It's a long process. And so there's a lot of questions. Like when we went to your home, there were a lot of things that I looked at. And, I saw things. And, and I think you've made the major changes in it. And, of course, I think your house is going to be totally healthy now. But some people don't make any changes, and they just say, oh, mold. It doesn't bother me. I can, it's nothing.
What about black mold? I heard that's dangerous.
Black mold's got to, I think that's part of the media. People love to say black mold, and they connect it with toxic mold. So it doesn't matter what color it is.
Okay.
And the mold comes in probably, you can see purple mold, you'll see yellow mold, green mold, white mold, black mold, brown mold. There's all kinds of mold. And it's not it's the color, but there's a really interesting thing about what they call black mold or toxic mold. Toxic mold actually is a type of mold that's a Stachybotrys. It's a type of mold. And what that does, that grows and it gets in the house. It's not common in this area. So when you find it, you know you have a problem, because it took a long time for that to set up and to actually grow. But when you find it and it starts to grow, what it does, it has a defense mechanism. It gets a little area and it starts to grow. It's feeling really good. It's got moisture, and that colony is getting bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden, a different type of mold comes into the area and sets up camp right next to them. And what happens is the Stachybotrys sends out a toxic fume that will actually kill that. And that toxic fume is what bothers humans. So if you're in an area where you're just closed in, some of those people, very sensitive, very small percentage, but those people who are very sensitive to mold can get very, very sick. And I mean, even to the point of the possibility of death exists. But it's very rare and very unusual for that to happen. If it gets that, it means that somebody's had mold for a long time and they just haven't tried to take care of it. So that's all black mold and Stachybotrys.
Okay. Well, yeah. So how do we avoid mold?
Well, avoiding mold is a really good question. Like I say, right now there's mold every place we go, inside, outside. There should be less mold outside, and there should be more mold outside and less mold inside. So how we avoid mold, or the problematic part of it, is to keep it from moisture. So what we want to do is be constantly checking the areas we work in. And so like if you work in an area and every time you walk in, you might work in some kind of a construction area and there's a puddle. What you know is probably mold is getting into that puddle, there's moisture, and it's going to start to grow. Some places it's going to go off and start a colony. And once you close that area in, somebody in that group is going to be really affected. So mold, the only thing you can do is you can fight mold by watching moisture. And where do you look for moisture? Under your sink, around your toilet bowl, under your bathroom sink, around your shower, any place where there's a hose that leaks into anything where there's a hose that's going to leak into something. So you're looking for that all the time. And so the way that you keep mold from your house is just to be aware of moisture.
Moisture.
Mm-hmm.
What about ice dams? It turns out that I had an ice dam in my house, and I didn't realize it, but it was dripping some water into the ceiling of my daughter's bedroom. And all of a sudden, one day I went in there and I saw a spot on the ceiling, a moisture stain. And I think it came from an ice dam that was on my roof. Did you have any suggestions about something like that?
Ice dams are definitely one of the signs we look for. When I go to a house and I see, if it's in the winter and I can see ice dams there that are already setting up, that's the first thing I do. I want to know, I want to go inside that house and I want to see what kind of damage is being done. The problem is, in your case, you saw it because you could see the staining of the ceiling. What happens to many people, it gets up in the attic and they don't see it.
Oh.
And they might not be an attic where they go up all the time, so it could be an unfinished attic. So what it does, it's simply this. The ice picks up the shingle, and as it melts and freezes, it works its way under the shingle and then into the wood, and then it starts dripping. Even nail holes, they'll get eventually, will get wet. Any place where there's a separation or a joint, that's where you're going to see water just dripping in. So ice dams are one of the biggest things that cause problems for people over long terms because they just avoid them. And there's a lot of things we can do to prevent ice dams. And one of the things, if you see ice dams and you see, actually ice forming on the edge of your roof and icicles coming down, there's a good chance you're going to have ice dams. So what you want to do is get somebody, if you can't do it yourself, get up into the attic, crawl around with a flashlight, and see if there's any moisture on your insulation. Insulation, usually fiberglass insulation, will not doesn't grow mold because there's nothing in there that the mold can eat. But what happens is dust settles on fiberglass. And as the dust settles, that becomes food for mold, and then the mold joins it. And then all of a sudden what you're doing is you're creating this colony, and then it's getting in your attic, and eventually it'll get into your heating system and your cooling system. It'll work its way downstairs, and then people are being affected. And when it gets real bad, you'll smell mold. You get that moldy smell, as they call it.
Can mold be affecting you even if you don't smell mold?
Sure, yeah. In fact, right now, mold is just one of those things that, we have mold right here. Now if we had 100 people, about 3 or 4% would be affected by any type of mold. And if there was just regular mold, or whether it's dead or alive floating in the air, they'll start to cough, and they'll start to get all kinds of results, just like you have any allergy. For example, people get stuffed noses, stuffed ears, they start to get vertigo, they start to get sick. But it's that small percentage, and that's how it happens. So that's one of the things that anywhere you go, you're going to get mold. But you just want to be aware of the symptoms. And when you start to get something like vertigo, you know seriously, you've got a serious problem, and you want to get to someone who knows about mold. That's the most important thing.
Dust mites?
Okay.
Yeah, I've always wondered about dust mites. Could you talk a little bit about that and how they affect your health?
Well, dust mites are one of those things that people really have a funny relationship with dust mites because there's so much misinformation about dust mites. And if you think of a dust mite, I don't know if you've ever seen one, dust mites are really strange looking little things. They kind of look like space aliens. But remember, they're microscopic, and they're as small as, they're a little bigger than a mold spore. But they're very microscopic, and you can't see them. We can't see them. They're in the air. They're probably on our jackets, and they're everywhere. There's millions of them in the atmosphere. And the interesting part about dust mites is they love skin cells. It's a delicacy to them. And if you think you've got a family of 4 people, each year we lose between 6 and 8 pounds of skin cells. So it's just our skin is shedding, it's getting into the air. And just think of that, 6 or 8 pounds times 4. Wow. If you have a family of 4, you get 24 pounds to 32 pounds of skin cells floating around. And dust mites are just there. It's like they're just chowing away and chewing. And dust mites really don't bother most people that I know. I heard very little problem with dust mites. It's the feces of dust mites that really are allergic. And that's what happens. A lot of pets will get dust mites in their ear. And of course, they're resting there, and they probably get some skin cells and some dander they're chewing away at. But what's happening is it's the feces that's left by, and that causes inflammation, and that causes a lot of the allergy things. So when you want to be aware that what's in our atmosphere, there's so many things. There's pollen. We know about pollen. We know about mold. But also there's dust mites and skin cells. And then beyond that, right now in our atmosphere, we're probably being introduced to the forest fires that were in California last year. All of that got into the atmosphere, so all that dust from the forest fires eventually makes it our way. So if we examine this room, if we took a sample from this room, we could actually find probably meteorite dust. We find things like DDT, which was banned in '72, but there's still little segments of that's floating around in the dust that's in the air. So we want to be really aware of what's in our air and not just keep avoiding it, because if someone in the house, we get a problem, we want to know about it. And that's what I would do. I'd go in and say, I think this is your problem. And if you've got 3 or 4 people in the house are sick, it may not be mold. It could just be cardboard fibers or paper fibers that are bothering them. So there's many things it can be.
What do you think about air purification? Is there any way to clean the air?
Yeah, the air purification, well, I think what we call air purification is not really, for example, there's many of the things, many people I know, they have what they call tower air purifiers, and they stand about this high, and you put them in the room, and they kind of shift back and forth. And what they do is they take out the big particles of dust in the air. The problem is, every couple of months, or maybe depending on how dusty your house is, you have to take that filter out. And when you take it out, you introduce that same dust that the filter collected back into your room or back in your house. So I know people that have 3 or 4 of them, and they get them in all corners of the thing. So every once a month they clean them and they're happy. And that same dust that they collected is back in their house again, and it starts to recycle. So a real air purifier, what it does, it actually takes the dust and all of the any contaminant, mold, mildew, anything like that, it takes it out of the air and it collects it in a filter. And the one I use has a charcoal filter, and there's another product name called Zeolite. And what they do is they attract both odor and everything that would come in, mold, pollen, and it sucks it into the filter, and you never touch the filter. The filter lasts between 3 to 5 years, and when it gets to a certain point, you say, all right, I've had it for 3 years, you open it up, you take it, put it in a bag, and throw it away. So you never try to clean it. Now, that's a real air purifier.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones, I've done a lot of research on air purifiers. There's some that are very expensive, and it's kind of like the difference. Why would someone buy a Ford or a Chevy, or would they buy a luxury car? And so, like, if you get all the bells and whistles, you can pay between $1,800 to $2,500 for an air purifier. And it works okay, but all the bells and whistles don't necessarily work. Like, they have ion machines that go along with them, and they're not very healthy for you. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you interested in buying a big end product. The one I look for is a moderate price. What it does, it just purifies the air. And if it was right here, and we had it on this table, it produces a ring of 10 feet of purified air. So when someone has asthma or another respiratory problem, and they hook that up, all of a sudden it's like, for the first time they can actually breathe without feeling that tightness in their chest. So air purifiers are good if you really do some research and just don't buy the cheapest, and you don't have to buy the most expensive, but you have to buy something that works. And that's what a lot of times when I go to a house, I'll make a recommendation. I'll look and I'll say, I really think what you should do because of what's in your home, get an air purifier, stick it over here, and you run it 24 hours a day. And it's pretty inexpensive.
That sounds like a great solution.
It is, yeah.
Is there something we can do at home to avoid mold besides the air purifier?
Yeah, I think what people do is people really don't pay attention to mold. And so if you understand that mold is a problem, mold is everywhere. Everywhere we go, there's mold. And once it's in your home, you have to have a regular cleaning procedure. And one of the things you can do, and people go to a lot of problems to get, to do dust cleaning, they're using all those little Swifters and things like that. They're okay, but they really don't do the job. So what I recommend is if you got a dusty area, get a half a bucket of water and go down to your supermarket, and I don't know if anybody remembers it, but there's Boraxo. It used to be 20 Mule Team Boraxo. You can still buy that at a store. Put a half a cup of that in, take a clean rag, squeeze it, and then dust with that. Because what Boraxo does, it's a neutral and more alkaline. And mold and many of the even bacteria don't do well in an alkaline situation. So it's actually a way to fight mold. So you have to have cleaning procedures. But and you want to look for it. And if you see something that's mold, sometime ask somebody, talk with someone who, like a lot of times I'll get calls. I mean, I don't charge them. They'll call me and they'll say, I get this or that and I want this. Can you tell me about, and I'll give them some advice over the phone. And if I think it sounds bad enough, I'd say what I would recommend is that you get somebody in to give you a test and just go in and test it. And there's a number of things we can do.
You want to talk about the testing that's involved with mold diagnosis and treatment?
Okay. And, like one of the questions I just thought of, and I remember somebody asked me this once, I should explain it, why borax works.
Yeah, I'd like to know that.
Because it's alkaline. So there's two parts of, we're acidic or alkaline. And we see that in food too. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you deal with that. So the acidic part is that mold loves acidic type of thing. So that would be like a sugary, if someone spills sugar and water on the counter, or something like strawberry jam or something. That's a perfect place for like mold to go and settle. It'll settle in oranges even, because if you see an orange, sometime you leave it in the refrigerator long enough, it'll turn green, and that's mold. But if you take alkaline, which is the opposite side of it, we operate at a 7.4 alkalinity, 7.2 to 7.4, the human body does. So if we take and we have something that's 8, probably on the 8 scale, so there's a scale of 0 to 10. On 8, that's going to kill things like mold and other things that are acidic. And that also it makes it kind of uncomfortable for bacteria to live, and viruses. So just using something as simple as that, and it's pretty inexpensive to do. You don't have to have a lot of suds and stuff like that. You just have, warm water, clean your rag out, and then, when it gets real dirty, get a new rag. And so that's one of the things. But alkalinity is that. It's just part of the scale. 2 sides. Acid, it's very pro. It's good for mold. It's good for bacteria. And it's good for virus. Alkalinity makes it a little bit difficult for them to live. So they actually, it's not a favorable place for them to do. So when you clean like that, mold and bacteria will find someplace else to go. They won't settle there.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a great solution. It's really inexpensive. Anyone could do it. What about carpets in the home? What do you recommend for keeping those free of, dust and mold?
Well, carpets, one of the things they will tell you in the from the research part of carpets, of mold, is that your carpet actually gives you the history of the mold you've had in your house. It's kind of like, when they bore down into the ice up in the Antarctic, they can tell, like,
the layers.
Century after century what was in it. So somebody could go in and actually test your carpet, and they can tell kind of the history of what the type of mold that's been in your house. Because what happens, carpet actually absorbs and sucks in mold. So that's what's going on. So your carpet, if you're allergic, if you have real serious allergies to mold, is probably not the best thing to have in your home. It's a problem. Now, if you do have carpets, and I'll give you a couple of stories, and maybe it'll change your thinking. If you do have carpets, you want to have them, the more serious you have, if you have people with allergies, you want to have your carpets cleaned either 2 to 3 times a year at least, minimum. And I would recommend someone that doesn't use harsh chemicals, but something that's kind of a non-intrusive type of cleaner, which is usually a plant-based cleaner. And most of the companies now are switching to it because the demand is out there for it. But carpets are not the best thing to have.
Okay, what do you recommend for flooring if we're not going to use carpets because of mold sensitivities and allergies? What should we put on our floors?
Well, I think that's the toss-up. If somebody is not, if you don't have someone sick in the house, you can do what you want.
Okay.
But if there's somebody that's a problem, let's say you have an elderly person living in your home, and they have some kind of respiratory problems. The worst thing you can do is put new carpet in the house, number one, because that contains volatile organic compounds. It's all of the stuff that goes into the manufacturing of the fibers, and it's gases, and it's just being let out. And what that does, that just attacks the respiratory part of the disease. So that one of the things you don't want to do. The ideal thing to do would be to have wood floors, or there's some new one-sheet laminate type of floors that you can put down, and there's a wood type, which is laminate. So there's 3 or 4 things you can do. Most people would say if you can do it, if you can afford it, put wood floors in. So that's one of the things that you're dealing with. Most people can't necessarily, sometimes depending on how big the house is, it can get expensive. Laminates are a little less expensive. And sometimes if you've got a really action place, we have a lot of activity, you may want to put down what they call sheet goods. It's one sheet and it's a commercial grade, and it'll probably last the rest of your life. You'll never have to change it again. And then once you get all the volatile chemicals off it, it's a problem. But I do want to talk about carpets, how they're really important.
Oh, please do.
A friend told me about this story, and he said his dog kept getting sick, getting infected ear, and he brought it to the vet. And they would keep saying things like, you put this in the ear and it'll be back, you'll be fine. The ear would get cured, and then the dog same thing would happen. So it happened 3 or 4 times in a row over a period of a year. And finally, the dog owner started doing some research, and what he found was he ended up with understanding that his carpet was loaded with mold. And what was happening is the dog would lay on the thing and he'd scratch his ears and everything. And the mold would get in there, it would grow in his ears. And if they told him finally if he kept that up, he would have lost his hearing. But so what he did, he decided he was one of those people. He cleaned his carpets 4 times a year because he had children too. And so they crawled on the carpets all the time. That's pretty much it. So mold is, it's a mystery. And people still today, I mean, we can talk about it. I know that when people see it, they should call someone, and it's hard. But if we ever get together again, we can go into some of the more emergency sides of this.
Final thoughts on air purification?
Final thoughts, yeah. Keep your house as clean as you can. Really look into an air purifier, and just keep dusting. But, dust with a wet rag. Don't dust with remember the old dust cloths you used to take them and you just blow everything up. So that's pretty much it.
That sounds like really great wisdom. Thank you so much,
Okay, thank
Richard.
you.
It's so fun having you here and learning more about what you do and how you can help people be healthier in their home environment. This has been a great show. I just loved being here and helping everybody take another step to better health by understanding mold and by understanding chiropractic care. And I wish you a happy and healthy day.